Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Terra Mattson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Terra is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace. There's this pull amongst female leaders, really trying to balance the gifts and steward the talents we have, the visions that God has given us, and also be home with our families. I work with young leaders who are in their early 20s and they're like, I really want to do this well. I don't want to screw up my kids and have them in therapy. And I'm like, well, therapy's good. But you won't screw them up if you stay present and you live within your limits and your design. And you don't chase after the constant voices around us that you've got to be all, do all, and you need to do it all now. So the idea of having a coach that comes alongside you who helps you understand your design, your story, what is healthy and versus what is toxic, spirituality and relationships. That's what we do here at Living Wholehearted. We want to help you from the inside out. We don't want to pluck weeds. We don't want to be a voice in your life that makes you do more and we get off our calls and then you're like, man, I'm way behind. We want you to feel grace, but also have that accountability and that confidential space to be able to process who you are, the relationships in your life. We have 3 different ways that you can do this as a female leader. You can jump in with our group coaching calls once a month. It's low bar for you to come in, come out, and we usually cover some sort of specific topic that's unique to female leaders. We also have individual coaching. So you can come along, one of our coaches comes alongside you and we do a very intentional process with you. But we're just that safe person that's going to help you to continue to grow and to lean into, again, more balance and more life, work, joy in your life. The last is our cohort. It's my favorite. And this is a very intentional combination of individual coaching, group coaching, and retreats at our Living Wholehearted Legend Retreat out in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. We'd love to have you learn more at livingwholehearted.com. So today we're talking about a topic that is vital to every parent and person who's working with children today: what we need to know about the digital world and predators. However, know that this topic might be triggering for you, and so we just hope that you'll take care of yourself, maybe pause, process, and come back. But as you listen, we hope you will share this information and even this podcast with your kids along the way. But do listen first, make sure you're comfortable with the information, and then we would love for you, especially our teenagers, we really want to equip them with understanding how the digital world and predators are working hand in hand today.
Well, our guest, BJ Park, is a prosecuting attorney for the state of Oregon for crimes committed against children. He's worked with the FBI, Homeland Security, many cities, counties, state police agencies across the United States. With 20 years of experience, BJ's developed an internet safety program for parents to help parents and those who work with children stay safe. There are so many things loving parents don't really know about technology and the ways it's used to harm kids. BJ is married with 2 children of his own and cares deeply about helping children be smart when it comes to their gaming, their phones, and social media, and much more. BJ, it's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we have known you many years, and your impact on the greater community and safety has been so profound. And I love that you want to really bring this into the everyday home. The work you've been doing is often confidential and on the front lines of this. But before we tap into your expertise and we dive into more of the practical tips that parents are wanting to know, talk a little bit about your story and how did you even begin that journey of being a prosecutor and with
people definitely, let me say that again. How did you start your journey in becoming a prosecutor against crimes that are done against children?
Yeah, so I knew I always wanted to do something very impactful or significant that really helps people. I just didn't know what it was. And then, of course, I was not smart enough to think about what profession to take. And it was really the Lord that led me to this, which is a long story. But very, very clearly, he very deliberately, intentionally um, drew me into this profession, which, of course, was perfect for me in so many ways. And I was not smart enough to have picked it out. And so I'm very grateful to him. So I really think of it as a form of ministry, of course. And when you become a prosecutor, I started becoming a prosecutor first in Chicago, very, very peaceful city, where there's a lot of different violence, of course. But among all the gun violence and the murders and robberies and home invasions and all these different things, the I just really was impacted uh, in regard to cases that involved children as victims. Just felt a real heart for it because it's such a violation on so many levels, and the innocence of their being is just stripped away and ripped apart. And many times it's done by a family member, so that sense of betrayal is there as well. And it's so awful in so many ways. And I just didn't think that those should be treated as just another case. And so I really put my heart and soul into it. And when I did, I remember my first one, the supervisor was so happy. Uh, he said, "Well, that's a great job you did. Thank you. Here's 10 more of those. Can you do those?" And so it just kind of snowballed from there. And then I just realized, especially in the last 10 years plus, that social media, smartphones have taken over all of our lives, including our children. And I've noticed there was a lot of um, preying upon our innocent kids through those devices, through the internet. Um, Offenders don't have to use a crowbar to tear open our homes and climb into our kids' bedrooms anymore, although that sometimes does happen. But many of them have gotten smarter, where they just, slither into our room, into our homes, I should say, into our kids' hearts and minds through the internet. Um, Groom them and tempt them and do unspeakable horrible things. And so criminal justice system is really behind in many ways in catching up to this. And I just wanted to be as much as possible be in the forefront to help, because even within the prosecution world, there aren't too many people that's focusing on this. And the other thing that I realized is that this stuff is 100% preventable. The average age of kids getting a cell phone today is about 10, maybe 11, where they're getting this unfiltered, um, fully accessible smartphone that they're getting. And that's like fourth, fifth grade. And you can't even blame the kids because, their brains are not fully developed. And so it's very tempting for them to go play on this thing, and it's infinite. So I realized that there was a way to stop. And, my job is such that I come way after all the things have been done. And that's just our role. But I thought, I have such specialized knowledge in this area, because I train other prosecutors also in the state, because this is not a very well prosecuted area. So I thought, well, what if I can put together something on my own time, which I ended up doing, to help prevent in the smallest of ways. Because that's the other thing, was that kids from good homes were getting affected by this. A lot of times these crimes that you see in the criminal world are really affecting, they originate and they affect from a very small portion, where it's almost like a revolving door, where you see certain families and certain people that just come through the system in and out. But with this stuff, I mean, I've had victims who are kids of judges, kids of prosecutors, police, and just really like regular, good, upstanding people whose kids are just forever harmed by these things and the decisions they make. And so I ended up interviewing and asking a million questions to different detectives, FBI special agents, Homeland Security special agents, and compiled a lot of their own tips and mine into this little presentation, which you two are familiar with, since I gave it over to you and many of your colleagues. And so that's how I ended up kind of going on this trajectory.
Thank you, BJ.
BJ, though every parent says that they're going to be thoughtful and involved when it comes to technology and their kids, it gets hard fast, faster maybe than ever before because of the device of smartphones that you're talking about and other accessible items to the internet. Talk about the key principles that you've included in your presentation and what you give to parents and all kinds of audiences and sets as it relates to what every parent needs to know when it comes to phones, internet safety, and gaming.
Yeah, there's several things that every parent should know, which is that it's pretty much unavoidable that you need to talk to your kids about this stuff, and that you have to make it an intentional, ongoing conversation. There's no magical software or filtering device or technology that will help keep your kids safe. There's none. I wish there was. If there was,
That's sobering.
I would go talk about it, as a free salesman for them all the time. But believe me, I've looked up and down, and there's none. It's just good old-fashioned talking to your kids, and that really requires a sense of trust and respect. In other words, you have to have a good relationship with your kid. And I don't have to tell you two this really, but making it intentional such that even if your kids kind of either literally or figuratively roll their eyes or go, there's mom and dad going again, that kind of a thing, it still does register. Yeah. And they do appreciate it somewhere deep in their heart where they think, oh, my mom or dad cares about me enough to talk about this stuff. And they may kind of act that way, but it will stick in them. And I call it kind of seeds of truth. So talking to them about it is really, really important. And then some of the other principles include teaching them some of the fundamental truths about the internet. Things like the fact that what you do on these things is not private, that this stuff gives you the illusion of privacy. Also, whatever you do on this stuff is permanent. And it's really hard for kids to think about time, of course, and perspective. But when they're in college, when they're in their 30s, when they have their own kids, when they're in their 90s, hopefully, whatever silly thing they put on there, it doesn't get erased. Maybe nobody will find it, but chances are people will find it. There are ways to find those things. So you have to teach them that the internet is permanent, limiting their devices, helping them think before they do things, very, very basic principle. Like, hey, what do you think will happen if you do A? Do you think B will happen, then C, then D, then E? Kids don't think about what happens next. That's because they have, I call them having stage one thinking. Actually, a lot of grown-ups have this problem. They don't think, well, what happens if I do this? So it's kind of just teaching them that life lesson in general. So, hey, if you post that, if you send that text, if you do that, what do you think the effect will be? And they never really thought about it. Another would be just telling them straight up, do not send nude videos or pictures of yourself or others, period. And teaching them the general principle of the internet's not real. What you see on Twitter, Instagram, that's not an accurate reflection of life. A lot of people think that it is. A lot of kids think that it is. They have that kind of assumption in the back of their mind. So you have to tell them that's not true at all. Also teaching them to turn it off and walk away. They have that power. Many kids feel paralyzed such that if they're communicating with somebody that they don't know, God forbid, that they don't know who they're talking to, and that sometimes the other person has a grip on our kids' minds and hearts, such that the child does not think that they can turn it off. So some of those basic lessons, I think, are critical for parents to know and to go through, and that parents really need to talk to them about this stuff with specific examples, and talk them through all of this kind of thing, and that that as a result that we care deeply about our kids And that's why we're doing it. We should approach this in a pragmatic sense as opposed to a fear-based or a disciplinary kind of a sense.
Mm. All those principles are powerful. And often we think as parents, well, I told them, but as just like you tell them to turn off the lights 50,000 times before they're out of the house at 18, you have to talk about this all the time, every day, and at different stages. They're tempted in different ways. So one example of that, BJ, as you were talking, something when the girls were little, we were talking about the fact that you don't have to respond to every text or every call right away, that we have to set our priorities. And right now we're here as a family. So Jeff and I modeling that to them when they were little of now's not the time for us to take that text when they see the light go off on the phone and or we're in the car and we're driving. I'm really not good at this. I was going to say we, but I won't rat you. But like while you're in the car driving, is that the time to be responding or emails, all those things, modeling that to our kids and then talking about that because now when they're teenagers, our girls are 14 and 16 now, they've got all of these kids texting them at different times. And that urgency to have to respond is such a addictive, compulsive behavior. And so we're still having to talk about you don't have to respond. The internet and the phone doesn't control you. You decide. And then just yesterday, BJ, the other principle you said, it's not true. It's not true. Well, yesterday I got text yesterday by someone who said, "Oh, hi, Sally. I met you at the golf tournament. I was just reaching out." And I replied as a good citizen. I said, "Oh, you've got the wrong number." And they replied and said, "Oh, thank you for letting me know." I said, "You're welcome." Then they reply back and go, "What's your name?" And I went, man, I fell for it. So even those kinds of things, I'm an adult and I could see just how that game was being played even with me. That could easily have been done with my daughters. And so we always talk about not responding even to those. So speak to that.
Yeah. So the first example of the whole needing to respond back, I struggle with this with my 11-year-old who is looking at her iPad with group chat messages all the time, sometimes legitimate because they have event coming up and they're like, "Hey, what are you supposed to wear?" That kind of a thing. But of course, it turns into all kinds of silly stuff that they don't have to talk about, and they're talking just to talk on the device. So we talk about that and self-control. And one example that I like. This is why parents need to keep this kind of stuff in mind and think, even when I'm at work, when I have little moments between cases or projects or whatever it is, I think, I wonder how I can teach my daughter about this and that. And one time we were at, I forgot where we were. I think we were at some kind of a store where we needed service, like Costco or something like that. And the person, instead of, it just took a long time and we were in a rush, the person, instead of servicing us right before, got a phone call. And that person had a lot of questions. But here we were at the place waiting our turn. It was our turn. But this person was like, "Oh, yes, okay. Oh, yeah, let me check the price on that," and all of that. So I took that opportunity to tell our daughter, "You see what's happening here? Do you think that's fair?" And she's like, "No, we were here first and this and that." I'm like, "Right. You don't always have to answer this stuff. You have to do whatever is next, which is serve the guests that are actually here with whatever it was that we had." I mean, even maybe that's like a silly example, but I mean, even in just those kind of principles, I've used that since then and go, "Do you really need to answer that? Don't you have this and this and this to do first? That's your first obligation," which tends to be homework and chores and those kind of things. For certain, that's even in those kind of ways. If you think about it, this stuff really goes a lot deeper than just internet safety. It's just these little values and good habits that we're trying to form to our kids. And then the other example that you had, I'm sorry, what was it? I just had something.
It was the random person who texted me and kind of basically was hooking or grooming me to see if I would respond. And I was like, "Oh, yeah. I did. I caught it." Well, and I stopped after that, by the way. I want everyone to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that actually reminds me, of course, of Jesus, being a lawyer, arguing things in court and trying to persuade people and everything. I mean, Jesus was and still remains and always will be the model because if you really, and they really should do this at like law schools and stuff. Of course they don't, but if you really see how he responded to Pharisees or people who are trying to trap him at that intellectual level. Many times he responded by not answering, and that's one of the things I want to. Those times we go over those stories with our kids, that we tell them, like, you notice, like, they asked the question, did Jesus respond exactly? No, he actually didn't. Is that rude? Is that bad? Why is that kind of a thing? And essentially, I try to teach them, like, a lot of times when they ask, like Pharisees or whoever asks Jesus questions, it has a false premise in there. So that the very fact that he would be answering would trap him into certain kind of assumptions. And so he didn't play their games by just not answering. For example, when he was asked, are you, I can't remember the exact words, I really should, but are you the Son of God? At his trial, he didn't answer. He was just silent because he knew that if he answered, no, then they got him and he's denying who he said he was. If he said yes, that would give them the excuse to essentially murder him, which is what that whole thing was, which is a whole other thing. The fact that he was essentially, executed and murdered, it was done legally. And if you look at that story, they're passing the buck around where they're like, Pontius Pilate's like, nope, literally and figuratively washing his hands. You guys are the ones wanting it. And they say, nope, you guys are the one, that kind of a thing. That's by the way, that's such a sophisticated thing. When I read that, I knew that the Bible was true, because that's something so sophisticated that I see now, sadly, in being in government for 24 years. I see that now where they're passing the buck and all. And they wanted to pass the buck to Jesus, and he didn't. So they said, hey, let's give him his own keys to annihilating himself, and he didn't do it. And there's many such examples. And so that's one of the things that we can teach our kids too. It's like, you don't always have to answer. Not everyone is an honest broker that has honorable intents when they ask you a question. And you can win by not answering, just like Jesus. He's our model.
It's hard to believe, but fall will be here soon. I know some of us just started summer over here in the Pacific Northwest, so don't cringe when I say this. But as you start thinking about back to school, I want to encourage you to think about how you can be praying for your kids this next school year. We are parenting in a world that feels unsteady and confusing. Our kids are facing issues that we have never thought of before, especially those of us who are older and what we grew up with. While our ever-changing world wants to mark our kids' childhood with these things, God wants to mark them with a faith that transforms their lives from the inside out. So whether you're feeling excited or anxious about this upcoming school year, maybe your kids are going into middle school and you've got those normal anxieties, or maybe heading into kindergarten, wherever they're at, the highs and lows this year, meet it with prayer. The Christian Parenting 2023-2024 Prayer Journal is now available. So Marked by Prayer is a prayer journal for Christian parenting that was created just for you. This journal will guide you in praying for your kids every week of the school year. Each week presents a new topic to journal about. Topics include things like generosity and self-discipline, salvation, godly friendships, and more. So join us as we pray for our kids and that they would be marked by God. Visit cpgive.org to request your school year prayer journal, Marked by Prayer. Again, that's cpgive.org. Request your copy of Marked by Prayer today. You can also listen to Pardon the Mess podcast each Monday to listen to your guided prayer and reflections that follow the journal. It's a hand-in-hand combination, and we are so grateful to partner with Christian Parenting. Get your prayer journal today.
BJ, it's brilliant. What you're saying is brilliant. And it's helping parents really think through critically, because I will say most parents want to teach their kids to be polite and, again, not be rude. And when you're looking at Jesus, the ultimate model for us, there are ways that he was very clear with his boundaries and very smart in not being trapped, right? Wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. So I appreciate you pointing parents to say it's okay for us to teach our kids of appropriate times to be rude, quote unquote. And in that it's not rude. It's actually being very discerning and protecting and learning how to keep from being brought into predators. So let's talk more about predators.
Yeah. So as we think about predators, and we think that word scares a lot of people, and I think it should in many ways. There should be a healthy sobriety about what evil looks like in this world. And BJ, you've had a front seat to this for so long. It was a calling. You've stepped into this calling. You've got this experience. I remember seeing a slide that you showed of individuals. There was a dozen at least people that you helped put behind bars that were doing terrible offenses to children. So we need you to speak to what do predators know that parents and kids just don't know generally? Give us insight into what we need to be looking for and preventing out of love, out of a desire to have healthy relationships with our children and to guard them from these predators, these wolves that are coming to take an advantage of them and use them for their own benefit.
Yeah, so predators know a lot. The primary thing is they know how to probe and explore and see which kid is vulnerable. Predators often, even if they have a day job, they spend hours and hours and hours every day on the internet, in these teen forums, in these chat kind of platforms, and they observe and watch kids. Sometimes they'll go in and talk a little bit and everything else. And it's just like actual hands-on sexual abuses. They're looking to see which kid is the weak link, so to speak. Some kids are pretty feisty, where if as part of grooming, they may do a little tickle, a little wrestle, that kind of a thing. And they'll do the same on the internet, where they'll probe a little bit. They're looking for those kids who are allowing that a little bit more, or who are not kind of giving that look of like, hey, did you just touch me here, kind of a thing. And then they could do the whole, oh, that was by accident. My hand just kind of brushed against your, chest area or other area, that kind of stuff. They do the same thing on the internet. And so what parents should know is that these predators, even if they're uneducated, even if they don't have any skills, fueled by their horrendous desire, they actually are kind of an amateur psychologist is what they turn into. And they know when to dare the kids, when to make them kind of mad by insulting them, when to prey upon their insecurities, when to compliment them, when to engage them on an intellectual level, when to be like a crying shoulder for them and let the kid just spew off or rage or vent about something, try to gain their confidence. All of those kind of things. They know when to do that, when not to do that, because that's what they do on the internet all the time. And they'll make a lot of mistakes initially. When we catch these guys, we look through their computer, and it's just a massive amount of information where they're on the internet every day trying this kind of stuff out, talking to them about to what degree will this kid talk to me or reveal to me or send me her pictures, or then thinking about to what degree can I really manipulate this kid? Is this kid somebody in need and looking for that, for lack of a better phrase, male approval, where they need that kind of venting, and I'll be that shoulder to cry on. And before you know it, as the kids are going through puberty, whoever they confide in, they end up being attracted to. And sometimes kids get confused and they think that's a sexual attraction, or that's a emotional attraction, and think like, oh, he knows or she knows the real me, kind of a thing, what they end up telling themselves. And so they can get really sophisticated. And that's how also a lot of trafficking start as well. So when kids are going through a lot of turmoil or problems or issues, and it's not a healthy home especially, but even if it is, and if it's like a really strict home, for example, I've seen many of those situations too. The predators know how to effectively probe and manipulate our kids. And so that communication with our kids about difficult topics is really, really critical.
Mm. Yeah, and you said it earlier, but the key here is relationship with our kids, and that is
Yeah.
so that their buckets are full and they trust us to talk about things when they're tempted or pulled. Um, and it's just this fine balance because, there's just woundings in our families. I mean, none of us parents do this perfectly. And so kids can have woundings all over the place. So it's teaching them where to go when we're hurting. And it's not the internet or the stranger on the internet. I'm thinking about the more realistic. You said most of the offenses, which is true in our offices and our counseling offices, are from someone they know. They're not the random person on the chat room. They're like the coach who is engaging them on their phone.
A relative.
Or a relative or a cousin so talk a little bit about just warning signs or things that parents need to cue in there when the parents thinking, oh, this is just the TA from the school. And, oh, I love that they're wanting to invest in my child. What are those big red flags for you, BJ, when you think about parents out there and even for your own kids? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different red flags depending on each kid, but one of the most universal common denominator one is if anybody has a lot of time or access to your kids. And it could be for seemingly very legitimate reasons, but it just happens that this coach or this teacher or this whatever, their friend's older brother or whoever it may be, just ends up spending a lot of time with your kids. Every single one of those perhaps are explainable or there's a reason or excuse or whatever for it. But the bottom line is they end up having a lot of access and time to your kids. And that's one warning sign. Another is generally, this is not always the case, generally, kids' moods change. Their personality changes a little bit, where they might be a little more snappish, or they have kind of a worse attitude, or they become a lot more secluded in their rooms with their devices, which should not be allowed, by the way. Kids should not be looking at devices in their room for long periods of time, and most definitely not overnight in their rooms. No parent should allow an internet accessing device, whether it's a phone or computer or tablet or whatever, in the kid's room overnight. There should be a universal docking station for the family. Part of the rules should be to have that device in that docking station, which should not be out in the living room. It should be in the parent's bedroom by a certain time. So when your child is spending an excessive amount of time on their phone or their device, and they seem kind of like secretive about it, so that if you kind of try to look at their phone or ask for their phone, that they become a little more hostile or ask why, those kind of things. You can pick up on those little things. And ideally, it's never too late to do this. Well, maybe it's too late depending on the situation, but generally, if your kid is of a certain age where you want to kind of create the relationship and the culture when you first allow your kid to have a phone, that you check your kid's phone. And you want to have your relationship such that your kids are not only okay with it, not that you need their permission, but their mindset is such that they actually will come to you and say, hey, I want to create this new account, or hey, I just sent this text, or I just looked at this posting, or whatever it is, or I want to send this. Can you check it for me? Mom, Dad, can you look at this to make sure it's okay? That's the kind of relationship you want, where you sufficiently warn your kids and frankly scare them just a little bit, a healthy amount of fear, such that your kid realizes like, oh, I can really get into trouble for myself. So I want somebody trusted, that the kid trusts. I want my mom or dad or whoever to check before I do something. That's the kind of relationship that you would want.
I love that. There's some really key principles in there. Don't have internet devices in the room overnight. The docking place, not even in the living room. I think that when you shared that with us, we actually went home right away and readjusted where our docking station was, because we weren't really thinking, we trust our kids, But you were talking about that 3 a.m. temptation kind of thing, and we're sound asleep, and prevention's good. So we just don't want to even tempt. So we moved our station closer to our bedroom so we can hear and see. I thought that was so good. I want to speak real quick with my clinical hat, BJ, and then we're going to land the plane. To the families that didn't start here, and you're seeing like, oh my gosh, this is out of control in our home. Kind of a little tip for that is taking a reset weekend where maybe you go camping or you go on a little mini trip, but nobody brings devices and you all detox for a little bit. I know families will do a digital device detoxing even for 40 days, but it's a reset and then coming back and saying, you know what, it's time to renegotiate the boundaries and the rules in our home. We're all going to work on this together, and then working on those contracts and resetting. Your kids will thank you for it later, but not at the time. They're going to fight you. But then you can process, what was that like for you to be without your devices? And I guarantee you'll look at each other in the eyes more, you'll talk more, you'll feel more, you'll laugh more, and you'll start to see some of those behavioral issues also subside a little bit, because kids are highly affected. We're all highly affected by our devices. So, but the reset is a good strategy if you've had a lot of poor habits already built up in the home. BJ, what do you want to say to that?
Yeah, to that's I wholeheartedly agree, and I think that's so critical, and it's never too late. And I try to speak to our kids about essentially kids care about status. They care about how they seem and how they're perceived. So I try to play into that and say, sometimes I'll actually take a photo of them looking at their devices when they're allowed, or their phone or whatever it is. And I try to say it nicer, but I essentially tell them, you know how kind of sad and pathetic you look when you're just doing this? You're just sitting there, you're doing nothing. Do you understand that Lord made our bodies to move? Every single part is created to move. You're sitting there doing nothing, and you're just consuming, and you're just being affected. I just kind of make fun sometimes and go, "You just looks like you're drooling over here." You just kind of look pathetic. And I said, listen, in life, you can either just sit there and consume, like you're a plant or something, or you can actually be a creator. Just like I want to put into their minds, like when they're later on, when they're good employees and workers, don't think like a worker. You have to think like an owner. Create your own. Be your own boss, and all of these kind of things. So much more critical and important. Same thing. Do you just want to sit there and drool and be a consumer? Or do you want to actually, even if you're creating something, within boundaries, of course, and healthily and that kind of thing, or do you want to go do an activity of which, we can record and maybe put it on in a healthy, good boundary kind of a way? So I try to play into that and put into their minds, like, that's you're just like, what are those? I can't remember what those fish are, but you got the big whale working and swimming to catch all the fish. And there's that fish with that thing on the top of their heads where they just attach themselves to the bottom.
Yes.
And they just, whatever crumbs there are, they just kind of eat.
Yeah.
I said, you don't want to be that mooch.
Yeah.
I assure you, you'll be less productive, less respected. You'll be less happy, and just bad things. You're not getting the best out of life or what the Lord has in store for you by just sitting there drooling and consuming.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty sad and pathetic. No one will end up liking you, and so on and so on. Be productive, be the creator, be the owner, and go do these kind of things and actually live life. And if some of that gets recorded and you put it on, fantastic. But don't get into that mindset of this hive mind of just consuming and being affected. That's pretty sad and pathetic.
Yeah, and
we don't want that for you in your life.
And you give them a vision of people that are actually living vibrantly and actually have real relationship that they know. Even maybe it's a friend who's a little older, or somebody that they can look up to that isn't addicted to their device but is living real life. And maybe they do post here and there, and you're not advocating at all for putting away all technology is bad. No. It's like you advocate for the use of it, and just like I remember your encouragement too. You're just like saying, just as we attend to our kids when they're preparing to drive,
teach them in the same way how to drive, how to utilize this technology that is going to be in their lives forevermore, and replaced by some things that are better, faster and faster and faster. With the relationship that you have, do that. You mentioned the word contract. You mentioned it, and I just thought this is important for our listeners. There's so many free examples of contracts that you can have with your kids about the use of technology. And you can include yourself in those contracts. So when you go on those reset retreats, it's saying, hey, as a family, here's what we're committing to. And you actually sign these things and come back to these. And these are things that you agree to. And you can incentivize your kids. There's so many great ideas. And I remember you bringing forth, showing a few of those examples. But just on Google, parents that are listening, you can find these and make this a relational turn. And just wanted to make sure we drew that out before we end today.
Okay, so we're going a little over time. BJ, is that okay for you? Because this is really important. And I just feel like our listeners, there's a few more things gold nuggets I want to grab from BJ. So at the end of the day, some parents are like so anxious right now and just want to move out in the woods and have go off grid. And there's others that are like, I still don't see the big deal. Like, there's trafficked kids and there's, porn, child porn, all these things that we know about, but we're pretty good. We know our kids and our kids aren't going to be vulnerable. So you've got those two extremes. Give us the one thing that you really want every parent to keep in front of them when they're thinking about the reality of our kids being on the World Wide Net at age 4th grade, all the way through the rest of their life. So give us that one last nugget or word of encouragement that you want every parent to hear before we are done.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is that, that essentially nature abhors a vacuum. And if a parent is not really sufficiently involved in the kid's life in this area, something else will fill it. And it's not just a matter of preventing and all of this kind of stuff, but as you two are saying, it's an incredible opportunity to engage in relationship with our kids and talking about this stuff. Kids actually care about this. So if you talk to them at this level about how to keep safe and, how to touch and navigate through so that, give them some internet tips about this and that. And, when most of us, I think, consume the news to some degree, even if we just look at headlines, you see something where he talks about internet safety, or there was a guy who, he looked 13, but he's actually 26, who was perpetrating on kids. Or there's an article that I showed during the presentation about how Harvard University rescinded a whole bunch of offers that they originally gave because they kept on investigating and found all kinds of Facebook messages that are inappropriate according to them. So they ended up rescinding and canceling a lot of those offers. Mark that or send that to yourself as an email and just show that and just read through it out loud with your kids and just have quick little conversations about them, about those things. And so that would be the encouragement, really, isn't just to be completely scared or completely be indifferent about it, but often these obstacles, the key is to turn these obstacles into incredible opportunities. I mean, that's what Jesus did with the cross. He took that incredible sadness and turned it into the greatest. He turned the greatest obstacle into the greatest opportunity for all of us. Transforming defeat into the ultimate victory that's lasting now and forever. And so there's a way to do that with all of this, and create and hopefully a wonderful, trusting relationship with your kids, and also giving them some really good tips about how you write this in the internet, you put this in a text or whatever it is, other people are going to see it. With this comment about Susie or Jennifer or whatever it is, you can see how this could be construed kind of mean, and you can be labeled this or that. Or I tell them, like, when some judge makes some very, frankly, crazy ruling, when people write to me and say, hey, I heard about that case, and I get this email or text, what'd you think? I don't write back my thoughts. I say, call me.
Yeah, it's wisdom.
And then, right. I don't put that in writing. I mean, just even those kind of lessons hopefully will embed in our kids' minds. And that could serve them so well, because who teaches our kids about that? School doesn't.
No.
A lot of employers don't do that either. So these are just incredible opportunities. I hope parents don't think of it as, oh, another burden, oh, another thing to do, another, that kind of a thing, but more like this exciting new opportunities to get closer to our kids.
And this is as you say, the hope is that these crimes actually, and you've been there, sat in these seats, and know the depths of them, are 100% preventable. And you're giving the antidote to that by seeing the relationship as the opportunity and as early as possible. That's good news for today.
It is. Okay, so TikTok or no TikTok?
Definitely no TikTok.
Okay, why? Because I argue this with so many parents who think it's no big deal. Tell us why in your best lawyer voice.
This is like extra nuggets right here with some dipping sauce.
Well, for several reasons. If parents really think about TikTok and the stuff that's on it, of course, like any forum, there's Bible-based messages and all of that on there. I get all of that, but still, TikTok specifically, I believe, is pretty insidious. And the reason is because think about the way they construct the platform. I mean, it's I think the maximum video, the longest on there, is 3 minutes, which is rare. The average is more like 7 seconds. And so attention span just keeps going down big time. That really affects kids' emotions and their ability to control emotions, and specifically their ability to delay gratification, which is so critical of a skill and value to learn in life. We know many adults who are terrible at that, and that ends up having terrible consequences. Also, think about where the video will replay as opposed to just end or playing the next video. It just replays over and over and over. That also feeds into the addiction issue. They've constructed all of that very, very deliberately and intentionally to feed into the kids getting more and more hooked in and addicted. YouTube has created their own version of TikTok called YouTube Shorts, and we don't allow TikTok in our house, but YouTube Shorts are frankly just as bad because it's essentially the same thing. And our daughter has become addicted to it, and we're working on it. But even she realizes it, and at one point she feels like she can't stop. And so even for adults, it's very addictive in that way. The other thing is, they've had congressional hearings about this. You can actually look this up, but TikTok is created by a company called ByteDance, which is a Chinese-owned company. So it's not a U.S. company, but specifically during the hearings, if you look, essentially the laws of China are such that the Communist Party has access to all of those things. And when you really take a look at the user agreements, if you actually are such person to actually download the app, the terms and agreements that we go past. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I don't even read that stuff. You just go, okay, fine, I agree. Buried in there are some incredibly insidious things where you're essentially agreeing to full access to all of your information on your phone and devices. And the way things are linked now, not only do they have full access to all your contacts, all of their, if you put in birth dates or addresses, phone numbers, all of it, but that I believe it's also their access to their information and whoever they're linked to. It just kind of spreads from there on. So it's kind of a Trojan horse where they have incredible amount of information, and who knows what they do with that information. Nothing good can come out of that. And so there's many reasons why one should not have TikTok. Life existed before, and I think life will be just fine without it.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Oh, I love it. Okay. There are more questions in me, as you both probably know, but BJ, your time has been so valuable. And just with parents who are receiving this now, maybe even for the first time, really thinking this through. Thank you so much. There might be some that would like to invite you to do this presentation. I know we're going to be having you in our greater community with a panel to be able to share with schools and churches in the area. Is there a way that anyone, if they want to find more from you, is there a resource you'd like us to put out there on the World Wide Net, or would you rather stay off grid?
No, I actually, not just because of this, but it turned out well in this way, but I actually don't have any social media. I just have really no interest in it. But people can find me on my personal email, and that's my full name and my last name all together at gmail.com, which is bumjunepark, all one word. And that's B as in boy, U, M as in Michael, JOON as in Nancy, bumjunepark at gmail.com. And yeah, I have this little presentation that I put together. I have one for parents, one directly to kids, and I actually have a third one for like really young kids, probably like third grade or younger. It's based on a presentation that I got from a PowerPoint presentation that I got from National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, but I've kind of transformed it into my own. I've been giving it now for about 2.5 years. This is the one that I created in my own time from all the different knowledge and experiences that I've gotten from myself and as well as many other law enforcement agents who do this on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and how much they've learned. And I'm happy to give it online. It's free. So whoever may be interested, I can give a preview of it as well. Please feel free to contact me through email.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll have that in the show notes. And BJ, thank you.
Thank you, BJ. We appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if you're interested in learning more about what we do here at Living Wholehearted, you're needing more resources, maybe you just want some parent coaching to work through, how do I help my kids? We're here. We've got professional counselors who are trained. We've also got executive coaches that do trauma-informed, and we just come alongside you as parents, leaders in the home. We come alongside you at work and the work that you're doing. And we're just so grateful for you being intentional in this way and helping us to keep preventing as much as we can. And if you have been a victim of any sort of crime in your own life or your kids have been, we hope you hear with grace that because of Jesus, there is nothing that can happen to us that won't prevent us from his love and his care and his healing. And so there is still hope for us. I think BJ, Jeff, and I being on the front lines, sometimes that's the hardest is we know too much. We think we can prevent everything from ever happening to our children. But at the same time, we know that life is hard and there are just wolves in sheep clothing everywhere. So we've got to be wise, discerning, and nothing can keep us from the love of God. So God is still working and we'll use all of our story.
He wins.
So bring hope. Yeah, we want you to bring hope. So go to livingwholehearted.com if you want to be a part of our community, and you can join our monthly newsletter there. Until next week, be the leader you will follow.
This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.